and a very warm, enthusiastic welcome back to the channel. If you are a regular listener of English Easy Peasy, you know just how much we appreciate you tuning in. I'm your host, and I have to tell you, seeing this community grow, reading your comments, seeing the likes, and feeling that support, it really is the fuel that keeps this engine running. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It is wonderful to be back with you all. And today we are doing something a little distinct from our usual routine for this deep dive.
Yeah.
This is a special installment of our English listening practice series.
That's right. We have a twofold mission today. First, we want to help you level up your English comprehension through storytelling. Because let's be real, a compelling narrative sticks in your brain way better than a dry grammar drill ever could.
Truly. I mean, context is everything when you're learning a language.
And second, we are going to perform a deep dive into a pivotal moment in history. We are looking at an event that really defined the trajectory of the Middle East and, well, arguably the world.
It is a moment that many historians consider a massive turning point. Today's deep dive is titled The Great Battle of Badr.
So let's set the stage for you. We need to transport ourselves back in time. We are going to the Arabian Peninsula. Specifically, the date is the 17th of Ramadan, in the second year after the Hijrah.
Right, a migration to Medina.
Exactly. For context, what is the vibe here? What is the atmosphere between these groups?
Tension is incredibly thick. You have two main players. There are the Muslims who had fled persecution to settle in Medina, and the Quraysh tribe back in Mecca. And there's a lot of bad blood here.
A lot of history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remember, when the Muslims left Mecca, they left practically everything behind, their homes, their businesses, their generational wealth, and the Quraysh essentially confiscated all of it.
So this isn't just a religious disagreement. There is a very serious economic dimension at play here. The Muslims are in Medina, they have lost their assets, and then they get some intel. They learn that a massive trade caravan is coming back from the Levant,
which is the area around modern-day Syria.
Right, and it is heading home to Mecca.
Exactly. And this isn't just a few merchants with a couple of bags. This is a huge caravan, heavily laden with wealth, led by a man named Abu Sufyan. So the Muslim plan was essentially an economic blockade. They intended to intercept this caravan to recover some of those financial losses they had suffered at the hands of the Quraysh.
Right, and this is a key insight for you as the listener. This was not originally supposed to be a full-scale war. They didn't pack for a massive standing army fight.
No, not at all. They mobilized for a raid. The historical reports state they had about 313 men. They had very few horses and very limited armor because, well, they expected to seize a trade caravan. They didn't think they'd be fighting a pitched battle against a superpower.
Right.
They were light, fast, and expecting a quick operation.
But, as they say in the military, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Abu Sufyan, the caravan leader, he's not oblivious to the danger, is he?
Far from it. Abu Sufyan was a very sharp strategist. He was on high alert, constantly scouting for spies. And this is where the story gets almost like a historical detective thriller.
Oh, I love this detail from the sources. Abu Sufyan is scouting near the water wells of Badr, and he finds camel dung. Just animal waste on the ground. Most people would walk right past it without a second thought.
Right, but he actually breaks it open. And inside, he finds date stones.
Yeah.
He knows that the camels back in Medina are uniquely fed dates.
Wow.
So that was the smoking gun for him. He realized immediately, the army from Medina is nearby. We are being hunted.
That is just incredible forensic work for the 7th century. So, realizing he is being hunted, he pulls a fast one. He diverts the entire caravan off the main road, takes a coastal route, and slips right past the Muslim net.
He escapes completely.
Oh.
And he sends a frantic message back to Mecca saying, essentially, send help, save your wealth. But, and here's the twist, once he is safely out of range, he sends a second message.
Saying what?
Saying, okay, false alarm, the caravan is safe, you can all go home now.
But the army from Mecca had already mobilized. And this is where the personality of leadership literally changes history. You have Abu Jahl, the leader of the Meccan army. He gets the message to turn back. Now, a rational leader would say,
We're accomplished, let's go home.
Precisely. But Abu Jahl wasn't operating on rationality. He was operating purely on ego.
Yes, the sources report his arrogance vividly. He said, "We will not go back until we have been to Badr." He wanted to spend 3 days there, slaughtering camels, drinking wine, and listening to music.
It was a massive PR campaign. He wanted to throw a victory party on the battlefield.
Exactly. He wanted to make a show of force so terrifying that all the Arab tribes would fear the Quraysh forever. He wanted to visually cement their dominance in the region.
So now the script has completely flipped. The Muslims are out there with just 313 men, expecting a caravan raid, and suddenly they're staring down the barrel of a 1,000-man army that is fully armored, has heavy cavalry, and is completely ready for war. It's the classic underdog scenario.
It is the absolute definition of an imbalance. The Meccans have the numbers, the weapons, and the horses. The Muslims are outnumbered 3-1 and ill-equipped. If you were betting on this, statistically speaking, you would bet on Mecca every single time.
But this is where strategy and leadership come into play. Let's talk about the Muslim response. The Prophet Muhammad holds a consultation. This wasn't a dictatorship. He actually asked for advice on where to position the troops.
That's a crucial point to understand. One companion, Hubab ibn al-Mundhir, asks a very specific question. He asked the Prophet, "Is this spot where we are standing divinely revealed, or is this just war strategy?" And when he was told it was just strategy, he said, "This is not the place."
I think that's such a fascinating insight into their dynamic, you know, that you can challenge the plan if it's about tactics. So what was Hubab's suggestion?
He suggested moving the army to the water wells closest to the enemy. The idea was to fundamentally control the water supply. They built a basin for themselves to collect water and then blocked or filled in the other wells.
Oh, wow.
So in the scorching desert heat, the smaller army had all the water and the much larger army had none. That is a massive logistical advantage.
It forces the enemy to fight on your terms. Thirst makes you desperate and rash. And there was another environmental factor that the sources mention, the rain.
Yes, it rained heavily the night before the battle. Now, usually, rain in the desert can be a huge mess. But the Muslims were deliberately positioned on a sandy dune. The rain actually packed the loose sand down, making the ground firm and very easy to run on.
Whereas for the Meccans, who were further down in the valley,
It created a swamp. The ground became incredibly muddy and slippery. If you are a heavy soldier weighed down in chainmail armor or you're trying to maneuver war horses, mud is an absolute nightmare. It slowed them down significantly.
so the stage is set. You have the Muslims with the water and the firm ground, but they are still vastly outnumbered. The battle begins in the traditional Arab way of that time, which is with duels.
Right. It's almost like a formal ritual. 3 champions from the Quraysh step out: Utbah, Shayba, and Walid. They lightly challenge the Muslims to send out their best fighters.
And the Muslims respond with Hamza, Ali, and Ubaidah. The sources describe this combat as intense but incredibly quick. Hamza and Ali defeated their opponents rapidly.
That initial victory in the duels was a huge morale booster for the Muslims and a massive psychological shock to the Meccans. They really weren't expecting this ragtag group to fight with such lethal skill. But then, the general melee begins. The full armies violently clash.
There is a very emotional moment described in the sources regarding the Prophet himself during this chaos. He isn't out there on the front lines swinging a sword. He's in a command post, right?
Yes, they had built a palm branch hut called an arish, situated on a small hillock overlooking the battlefield. He was observing the tactical movements, but his primary action was deep, earnest prayer.
The descriptions are quite vivid. He was praying so hard, making supplication, that his cloak literally fell off his shoulders. Abu Bakr, his closest companion, actually had to hold him and comfort him, telling him that God would fulfill his promise.
And speaking of promises, this brings us to the aspect of the battle reported in the religious texts as divine intervention. The sources heavily emphasize that the prophet received a revelation that they would be reinforced.
Reinforced by what, exactly? Because they certainly didn't have reserve troops waiting behind a sand dune.
Well, as reported in the accounts, the revelation stated that God would reinforce the believers with 1,000 angels. The narrative from the sources says that these angels joined the ranks to physically strengthen the Muslim army and strike terror into the hearts of the opposition.
Whether you view that through a spiritual lens or strictly a historical one, the effect on the ground was undeniable. The tide completely turned. The Muslim lines held firm, and then they completely broke the Meccan formation.
The outcome was decisive. Despite the overwhelming odds against them, the Muslims won. The sources state that around 70 Meccans were killed, including major leaders like Abu Jahl, the very man who insisted on the war in the first place out of pride. Another 70 were taken prisoner.
And on the Muslim side, what were their casualties?
Only 14 martyrs. It was a completely lopsided victory that absolutely no one in the region expected.
The sources often call this specific day Yom al-Furqan, or the Day of Criterion. Break that down for us. Why use that specific word?
A criterion is a standard by which you judge things. In this spiritual context, it implies the day that clearly distinguished truth from falsehood. But historically speaking, it signifies the exact moment Islam shifted from being a small, persecuted religious group to a serious political and military force to be reckoned with. It fundamentally shifted the balance of power in the entire region.
It really is a classic story of resilience, strategy, and faith overcoming raw power. Now, as we promised you at the start of the show, this isn't just a history lesson. This is English easy peasy, and we are here to upgrade your vocabulary.
That's right. We have carefully extracted 10 advanced words from this story. These are high-level, useful words that will really help you sound more professional and articulate in your own conversations. Let's switch into teaching mode.
Okay, let's tackle word number 1. We use this to describe the battle itself. The word is watershed.
I will clearly pronounce it for you. Watershed. Watershed. A simple English definition. A watershed is a turning point or a historic milestone.
So an example sentence related to our story could be, the Battle of Badr was a watershed event for the early Muslim community.
To briefly explain it in simple terms, it means that after this event happens, nothing is ever the same again. It's not just a small change, it's a defining moment. For instance, graduating university is a watershed moment in your life. Let's repeat it for listening reinforcement. Watershed.
Excellent. Word number 2 is an action verb, intercept.
Pronunciation. Intercept. Intercept. To intercept means to stop, catch, or interrupt something that is traveling from one place to another.
Example sentence. The Muslims plan to intercept the caravan led by Abu Sufyan.
Think of playing sports. If a player catches a ball that was meant for the other team, they intercepted it. You cut off the path. Or in movies, police intercept a suspect before they leave the country. Repeat after me. Intercept.
Next up, word number 3, mobilize.
Pronunciation. Mobilize. Mobilize. To mobilize means to prepare and organize troops or people for active service or a specific task.
For example, the Meccans decided to mobilize a large army to protect their reputation.
And you can use this in business too. We need to mobilize the marketing team for the new product launch. It simply means getting everyone moving and ready for a specific goal. Let's repeat. Mobilize.
Moving on to word number 4, polytheist.
Pronunciation. Polytheist. Polytheist. This describes a person who believes in or worships more than one god.
Context sentence. The conflict was between the Muslims and the polytheists of Mecca.
To explain, the prefix poly means many. Theist relates to God, so many gods. Conversely, a monotheist believes in one god. It's a very specific theological term, but extremely useful in historical discussions. Repeating the word, polytheist.
Word number 5 captures that deeply emotional moment in the tent. Supplication.
Pronunciation.
Supplication.
Supplication. This is a very formal, humble way of asking for something, usually from God.
Example. The prophet engaged in earnest supplication, asking for victory.
It's much stronger than just asking. It implies you are in a lower position, begging or pleading with deep respect and sincerity. It's an intense word. Once more. Supplication.
Moving to word number 6, a favorite in the business and planning world, logistics.
Pronunciation.
Yeah.
Logistics. Logistics refers to the detailed organization and implementation of a complex operation.
In our story, controlling the water wells was a brilliant move in terms of logistics.
It's about the underlying mechanics of how things work: supplies, movement, timing. If you plan a large wedding, you are dealing with logistics. If you run a shipping company, that's all logistics. Let's repeat it. Logistics.
Word number 7 describes the outcome of the battle. Decisive.
Pronunciation. Decisive. Decisive. Something that is decisive, settles a dispute, or produces a definite, clear result.
Example sentence. The victory at Badr was decisive, establishing the Muslims as a new regional power.
It means there was no ambiguity. It was final and clear. Also, a decisive leader is someone who makes choices quickly and firmly without wavering. Repeating the word. Decisive.
Word number 8. Reinforce.
Pronunciation. Reinforce. To reinforce means to strengthen or support, especially with additional personnel or material.
Context. As reported, angels were sent to reinforce the Muslim army.
You can reinforce a physical building with steel, or you can reinforce a verbal argument with data. It's about adding extra strength to something that already exists. Let's hear it again. Reinforce.
Word number 9 explains the Meccan leader's motivation. Arrogance.
Pronunciation. Arrogance.
Arrogance.
Arrogance is an exaggerated sense of one's own importance or abilities, excessive pride.
Example. Abu Jahl's arrogance led him to refuse to return to Mecca.
It's confidence gone wrong. He thought he was completely untouchable. That is arrogance. We often hear the phrase, arrogance comes before a fall. Repeating it now. Arrogance.
And finally, word number 10. Criterion.
Pronunciation. Criterion. Criterion. A criterion is a principle or standard by which something is judged or decided.
Example sentence. The battle is known as the Day of Criterion, distinguishing truth from falsehood.
If you apply for a job, you have to meet certain criteria, which is the plural form. Those are the standards. If you don't meet the single criterion required, you don't get the job. Let's repeat it one last time. Criterion.
Excellent work, everyone. Now, before we fully wrap up this deep dive, we always like to leave you with something to chew on. We call this the reflection question.
Right. In the story of Badr, we saw a small, ill-equipped group face a much larger, more powerful military force. On paper, they should have been completely crushed, but they relied on faith, unity, and superior strategy rather than just brute numbers.
So my question to you is this. Can you think of a time in your own life when quality was more important than quantity? Or perhaps a time when having a strong belief helped you overcome a massive obstacle?
Maybe it was a small team at work that outperformed a massive department because you were more agile. Or maybe it was a personal struggle where you were the total underdog. We love reading these real-life stories from you.
Please share your answers or thoughts in the comments section below the video or audio track. We do read them, and honestly, writing out your thoughts is the absolute best way to practice the new vocabulary we just covered.
Absolutely. Try to use a few of the new words like decisive or logistics in your comment if you can. It really helps lock them into your memory.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Remember, your engagement, subscribing to the channel, liking this upload, sharing it with a friend who is also learning English is what allows us to keep creating this content. Your support is the true fuel behind this channel's growth and continuity.
We hope you found the story of Badr fascinating and the vocabulary section highly useful.
Definitely listen to the deep dive again if you want to practice those pronunciations. We wish you great success in your English learning journey and in your life overall.
Take care, everyone.
And see you in the next lesson.